how's it going? You're watching Vec, and today I'm doing a video to try to explain how you can pick your engines. It's a bit of a mess, so I'm going to try to explain this as well as I can in the terms that make sense for the game. Also, I'm going to be using some real life terms just to kind of clarify a few things. Hopefully it makes sense to you and it makes choosing your engines a lot easier. So usually when you're picking your engines, you're going to see two things. You're going to see displacement and the engine type. Usually displacement is going to be something like a 3.8, 4.0, something that has a point, something in it. That's always going to be your displacement. The larger the engine, the bigger the displacement. The next thing you're going to see, it's the engine type. This could be something like a flat engine, an inline engine, or a V engine. So a lot of people will tell you to look for two things when picking your engines. That is your top speed and your 0 to 60. This can generally be a good indicator of how the engine is at baseline, and it could help with picking your engines. Some cars such as the Evo or the RSR, it's easy to do it just by looking at these two metrics, but a lot of the time, especially with the example I'm going to use right now, it doesn't really work out that way. So right here I want to show you the 186. It's one of my favorite cars and I feel like it's a perfect example for what I'm about to talk about. So we have three engines with two different types. We have the 3.8 V8, a 3.8 V6, and a 4.0 flat 6. Both the V6 and the flat 6 have 6 pistons. However, you might notice just by looking at the screen that the horsepower is essentially the same, only a difference of about 1. However, when it comes to both engines, the torque is not the same. But another thing that you might notice between these two engines as I swap between them right now, both their 0 to 60 and their top speed is exactly the same. However, this is not the case when you're picking their engines when they're at base. Here showing the example of the 4.0 flat 6, it has a 0 to 60 of 2.83 with a top speed of 31. The V6 on the other hand has a 0 to 60 of 2.6 with a top speed of 211. However, fully upgraded, these engines are essentially exactly the same. So what do you do when you have two engines that are pretty much identical? You look at torque. So here I engine swap just to make it a little bit more clear when you're looking at both these engines. As you can see, the current horsepower is only a difference of about 1. The potential horsepower is a little bit higher. However, the V6 has a lot more torque, but the displacement is higher on the flat 6. By using a little bit of real world knowledge here, I might be able to make some sense of it. When the engine is working and the pistons are firing as they should be, they will be rotating a crankshaft. The pistons are attached to the crankshaft by the way of crank pins. On a flat 6, each piston has its own crank pin. However, in a V6, just like this one, each crank pin has a piston pair. This requires the engine to have bigger crank pins to deal with the force, the torque, of each piston pair. This isn't so much the case with a flat 6, so this might be why you get more torque from a V6 rather than the flat 6. However, you might also notice that the flat 6 also has a higher potential horsepower. That's because of displacement. A higher displacement means higher potential horsepower, and as you can see with these two examples, the displacement isn't that much difference, only about 0.2. But because of the types, you get a lot more torque from a V6 rather than the flat 6. That's two examples how to pick between two engines using the same number of pistons. Now we're going to be using an example of using two different engines that have the same displacement. So we have the V6 and the V8, both with the exact same displacement, 3.8. All the parts are exactly the same, even down to the twin turbo. Because of the displacement being the same, we also have the same horsepower. However, we don't have the same torque and we don't have the same number of pistons. The V8 has, well, 8 pistons. The V6 has, well, 6 pistons. When dealing with this kind of example, we have to look at compression. The more pistons, the more compression. And the more compression, the faster your engine works. So 8 pistons can move the 3.8 liters of petroleum a lot faster than 6. However, you do notice that the 6 has more torque. That's because 6 pistons have to work that much harder to displace the same amount of fuel. So just as a quick side note to make sense of horsepower and torque, I'm going to use a 100-meter dash analogy. You have two people. One's a runner, one is a body lifter. The runner can do a 100-meter dash a lot faster than a body lifter. You place 100 pounds or 100 kilograms depending on where you live, it doesn't really matter. Suddenly, the runner is slower, but the body lifter is unaffected. You put 200 pounds on each person, and what do you know? The runner can't run, but the body lifter is able to keep going. The runner represents horsepower, how fast you are. The body lifter represents torque, how strong you are. But when it comes to engines, you can't have one or the other, meaning you can't have horsepower without torque. So since both engines have the same horsepower, they essentially have the same top speed. However, the V6 has more torque. So does that mean the V6 is faster? Not exactly. It is a good way to choose between these two engines, but we're going to go back to the piston. The V6 again has 6, the V8 has 8. Because of the V8's higher piston count, it means each piston has less work to do, essentially less torque required. However, it pushes more fuel faster. So when you're stuck with an engine choice like this, look at the torque and the number of pistons. The difference between these two engines is only about 48 torque, but because of the number of pistons, the V8 is essentially going to be the faster car. One thing that this game does not tell you, and I believe it should because it's super important, is not just your 1 to 60, but your 1 to 100. Your 1 to 60 is going to be the same, but when you're actually driving the car, your 1 to 100 and your 1 to 200 for that matter is going to be vastly different. The V8 in this example is going to be overall faster. However, say you're picking this car not for speed, but for drifting. That's when you want to go with the torque. I know this is a lot to take in and a lot of this might not make perfect sense. And on top of that, I'm using 3 engines that are completely maxed out with identical parts. So out of these 3, which ones are the best engines? My choices personally would be the V8 for racing and the V6 for drifting. The higher torque helps you out more to maintain a drift, while the V8 is going to help you out more to be faster than anybody else. The flat 6 is a good in between, but unfortunately it has a lower torque potential, so it's not that great for drifting. So the V6 still wins out as far as drifting goes. However, it's not a bad choice for racing. At something like this, go for whatever sounds the best to you. For me, it's a flat 6. I just love the sound of a flat 6. However, when I'm going against other people, the V8 is going to be my choice. Going back to the 0 to 60 and top speed way of choosing things, it is a good way to choose between engines. However, you're not going to know which engine is the best once ultimate parts are put in. So it's always worth to buy a couple different engines and test them out yourself. Just as a quick example of choosing these engines from just baseline, here we have the V8 with a 0 to 60 of 2.6, max torque of 443, and a top speed of 231. Not bad. And here we have the V6 with a 0 to 60 of 2.6, pretty much the same as the V8. However, torque is much higher and we can see that already, but the top speed is much lower, starting only 211. But we also know that these engines have essentially the same top speed once everything is maxed out, so it still makes it pretty easy to choose between these two engines. If you're going for racing, it's still clear that the V8 is better. If you're going for drifting, it's still clear that the V6 is better. But as a final example, the flat 6, we have a decimating 2.83 0 to 60, even though it winds up with the same 0 to 60 once all ultimate parts are put in. The max torque is still the lowest, but because it's a 4.0 liter engine, the top speed is still pretty high, nipping at the heels of that V8. However, right now I want to make a big disclaimer about muscle cars, hybrid engines, and forged engines. If your car has an option of a forged engine or a hybrid engine, those are essentially going to be the best engines for your car. Unfortunately, that's just how this game works. So if you have options between forged engines, go for the forged engines. If you have multiple options with forged engines, well, you can use the same logic as we used before, choosing the other engines. A hybrid engine, on the other hand, it's a little bit more difficult because I'm not really sure what Ghost was thinking putting hybrid engines into the game. I'm not even sure how they implement hybrid engines. Usually a hybrid engine can mean a couple of different things. It can mean you have a combustion engine being helped out by electric motors such as the Koenigsegg. It could also mean you have a combustion engine with a hybrid drive, which could also make sense with the Koenigsegg in this game, because if you've ever driven or bought the Koenigsegg, you might notice that you have literally one speed. That's because the combustion engine is driving the hybrid drive, so the power is delivered instantly, so there's no need for different speeds. But hybrid engines are usually a good go-to. A lot of times it will provide you with higher horsepower and higher torque, making them excellent choices for both drifting and racing. Now, the other disclaimer, and I feel like I should make this a big disclaimer. There are some cars such as the Dodge Challenger, as you've been looking at right here, that have a very high potential horsepower with an amazingly high potential for torque. Do not, and I repeat, please do not be fooled by these. A lot of muscle cars have this weird tax where they can't really hit top speed. Just an example, the baseline Mustang that you get at the beginning of the game has amazing torque and amazing horsepower. However, it's basically a boat, and it even has trouble going higher than like 211, while other cars such as tuners with much lower horsepower have no issues. I'm not really quite sure why this is. It could either be some bad coding on part of Ghost or something just as simple as choice by the developers. However, this does mean that a lot of muscle cars actually make great choices for drifting. So if you want to drift a muscle car that's rear wheel drive, it's gonna make an excellent drifter. I haven't regretted my choices for drifting a muscle car. It's so much fun, and I'm pretty sure you'll have fun doing it too. Hopefully this helped you guys out. It was a big mess trying to make sense of this thing. I try to use formulas that I use in real life when comparing engines, horsepower, torque, all that stuff, but it doesn't work in this game because I'm not sure what Ghost did or how they decided to balance out engines. You can usually use your RPMs and your torque to figure out base horsepower and all that stuff, but in this game it just doesn't work. I'm going to do another video on how to choose your turbos versus superchargers. I didn't get to this one because I really wanted to take my time to really explain how these engines are going to work. Any other questions you might have, I'd be happy to help you out and explain anything. Thank you so much for watching. Like if you liked the video, subscribe for more content just like this because I will be doing so much more. And as always, take care of yourselves and each other. Thank you for watching.